Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 12 of the BIVBlog, Benedict's IT video blog. My name is Benedict Stockerband, and after I've been doing so much white collar stuff recently, I decided time for black t-shirt topic. Now, I'm currently busy setting up a new generation for my test/training environment, the data center on a disk, which I'll show you in a later episode once things have really started to work again. But I've been repeatedly rebooting machine I'm using there to check that it comes up properly, and that inevitably led me to think about a topic that's been, well, driving me pretty much crazy with certain people every once in a while, which is these uptime bragging wars. Now, especially in the Unix community / Linux, but it's just another Unix anyway. You have every once in a while people come up, oh, I've got a machine with an uptime of what, 4.5 years or so, and well, that triggers off a couple of nasty memories on my side. And I think that people who don't reboot their machines just to keep the uptime ever growing just do themselves and their employers, if we talk about business environments, a very bad service, to put it diplomatically. Why is that? A couple things that have happened to me. First one is my very first job, right after I got my degree. I was doing part-time system administration, part-time software development, which is a bad idea in many environments. DevOps out of scope, but okay. Anyway, one of the first things, or one of the things I've had to do in, I don't know, 2 weeks or so, was to take one server from one corner of the room, move it to the opposite corner of the room, and we had some crappy hardware there. It wasn't even 19-inch rack mountable, it was just some tower PC sort of thing. And Friday afternoon I waited until everybody left there, and then tagged the network cables, the sockets on the machine, so I connect things where they belong. There were several network connections on there, because the machine was doubling basically as a packet filter. And shut the machine down, unplugged it, moved it across the room, connected it again, brought it up again. And it started with a different name, so the host name had changed. All the IP addresses were obviously different, and all the packet filter rules were gone. And I spent hours trying to figure out what happened there, how to fix things, how the machine should have been configured, but didn't have much of a chance. Eventually I went home, decided I have to sort it out on Monday, because I couldn't reach anybody who knew about this machine really. Arrived there early Monday morning, and that senior system administrator who had caused this mess really came up, why didn't you save the configuration on the machine? Pardon me? Yeah, well, it was just on the fly configuration. You should have saved it somehow and then reconfigured it again. Sorry, this can't be serious. I mean, you have a machine where you know if it for some reason reboots, you lose all the configuration on there. Yeah, and you knew I was going to move this machine, didn't bother to tell me. Well, yeah, but you could have checked. Didn't stay in the place for too long. Didn't even, well, that place didn't last with me for even 2 months. But now this was just a case of carelessness, presumptuousness, incompetence, call it whatever you want. But the point is, these things happen accidentally. especially in the Unix world, where you have a running configuration configured through ifconfig or hostname or IP tables, blah, 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 and persistent configuration in some files. And if you change things on the fly, you have to make sure that the configuration is consistent once the system reboots again. So what I really want to see is I do something on a machine, check that it works, reboot the machine and see if it comes up cleanly again. That's something I've learned there. And I think it's very good practice to work like that. It isn't always possible. There are some machines that are really, really critical, and we talk a lot of money there. For example, here next to Frankfurt, there's the German air traffic control center. You don't just reboot anything over there just for the fun of it. But even then, if a system is designed properly, it is normally possible to make sure that you can take a single machine out of service while it's standby or whatever machine is doing the job, do your work, test things, and then bring the machine back into service properly. There are very few cases where this isn't possible. There are way more cases where this is possible, but people didn't bother or didn't know or didn't care or whatever. And you don't really want to be system administrator for those. Anyway, that's a bit on the Unix side, but there is another problem which is related to hardware, and that applies to pretty much anything, for example, with hard disks in it. Different job, different customer, different environment. We again had to move a machine physically, not within a machine room that time, but within an entire building. And that machine was one of those ultra big, ultra heavy IBM RS6000 Unix servers. Had an uptime of actually more than 4.5 years. Had about, I don't know, 24 hard disks in there. And our biggest concern was we shut the machine down, carry it across the building, bring it up again. And there's always a good chance that in these circumstances a hard disk fails, because the lubrication in the disk bearings sort of diffuses through the entire hard disk eventually, and it's getting harder, and eventually you reach a point where the motor can keep a running disk spinning, but it's no longer strong enough to spin up a disk once it has stopped. And these problems are actually serious. So in that case, we went through the trouble, get some extra backups, get the machine quickly from one place to another, so the temperature inside wouldn't drop as much, because that's another effect that makes the situation worse. When the disks cool down, there's an increased chance that they don't spin up again. Brought it up there. We lost one hard disk in a RAID 5 setup, so next business day we got a spare disk, put it in there, and until then we had a degraded performance, but that wasn't that much of a problem. If we had lost a second disk, the situation would have become, well, kind of ugly. We had the extra backups. Backups in that case means we had moved everything to additional disks. So if things had gone really wrong, would have had the machine with a bunch of external disks that contained the data, and then would have had to sort this out once the machine was up and running again. But again, the problem here is if a machine loses power or whatever for some reason, there's a chance it doesn't come up. So keeping a machine up and running for years and years and years and years, it's something to be bragging about, but it basically tells everybody who knows, okay, this guy or girl, sorry, has no idea about what it means to run an environment reliably and professionally. So I keep telling this to people every time they start with, oh, I've got a machine with uptimes of blah, 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 blah. And well, first thing I ask is that machine accessible from the outside or potentially vulnerable to remote attacks? because that's another good reason to be careful. But even if you talk about a backend machine that's not directly accessible, so security is not that much of an issue in a professional environment, if you can, you reboot a machine after you've done things. Because, well, biggest problem to me, or worst thing that could happen to me when I deal with Unix systems mostly, is that something has been changed on the fly on the machine, and yes, hopefully the configuration has been updated half a year ago, and the machine gets rebooted, doesn't come up properly again, and then you sort of go out, what has happened since the last reboot, and where could there be any sort of silly typo that somebody hasn't noticed before anyway? And that gets you quite a bit of downtime. You don't want that. So please, folks, if you want to be a proper system administrator or similar, grow up and make it a habit of whatever you do, whatever you've done, if at all possible, afterwards reboot the machine, check that it comes up cleanly. And if you're working into IT architecture, which is what I've been doing more than system administration over the years, build your systems in such a way that the system administrator in the field actually has this option without going to management board, I need 30 seconds of downtime for a reboot. Okay, next year. And yes, we only have January. So keep that in mind. And yes, it's nice to have a machine that has an uptime of 48 years. But if you want that, use a machine for that. That doesn't do anything in a production environment. Buy yourself a Raspberry Pi so you don't have the problems with the hard disk either. Leave it running and I've got even better uptime, and you got your bragging rights, but don't do this on production. Okay, so much about that. If you want to discuss, argue, come up with some super insults, oh, you're a complete idiot, I've got a better uptime than you, whatever, come over to the forum at www.stepladder-it.com/BIVBlog/12. And if you like this and watch this on YouTube, give it a thumbs up. Okay, anyway, hopefully see you soon. Have a nice day. Bye.